5 unique that it manages. 2 of them are specific to the RV park itself. Fund 618 is the RV park operating fund. It's, I think, largely what would be referencing. So it actually goes through review by multiple different processes. It runs through the standard county financial procedures in coordination with the finance department. Those finance reports are reviewed by a subcommittee of the Fair and Expo Board of Directors monthly on an expanded version as part of the committee. And then as the roll-up report, which is the same report that the commissioners see monthly in advance of each monthly Board of Commissioners meeting, and any comments or footnotes coming out of that meeting are provided to finance and footnoted for presentation to the Board of County Commissioners meeting. The other piece, why I bring up that there's 2, there is a separate capital reserve account for Fair and Expo as well, and it's treated exactly the same.
And you're going to segregate out some of those performance metrics so that you can look at those in regards to the RV park specifically, is that?
I think we're kind of looking to see how we can best provide the information to the commissioners and the community. Looking at that, Fair and Expo has multiple different lines of business, so to subdivide out Fair and Expo, it also potentially could mean we then need to provide different performance metrics for a number of others. So we may look at it as a specific call out in one of the existing performance reporting or follow through with providing a specific performance metric for the RV park itself. As we get into performance reporting for next fiscal, then we'll kind of evaluate, come up with a solution that seems to work across all of our different business lines.
Jeff. Anyone else?
Thanks, Jeff.
Can you focus on the Zoom here, everyone okay? Okay, all right, good. Great, all right. Move on to the next item. Facilities courthouse expansion pre-construction.
Before I get started, I think Lee wanted to say something. I just wanted to mention, as an audit committee member and due to my position in facilities and my role in the project, I'll participate in this portion of the meeting as an auditee, listening to the presentation and providing feedback, but I won't participate in any deliberations or final action. Thanks.
I should have let you do this.
It's so good.
Now I can't.
Could you just join the meeting as an attendee and share your screen?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, let's keep it. This is a big project, of course, highly visible right there at the end of downtown, the new county courthouse expansion project. Probably easiest to start kind of with some origins. Lee, I'm sure, could describe this in great detail. He's explained it to me a few times, but I'll do my best to kind of give a quick overview for everybody. So the courthouse property had 3 buildings on it. The A.J. Tucker building been on site since 1919. Originally used as a blacksmith and carpentry shop that was made out of cut lava stone, which was kind of unique. It was located on the southeast corner of the property. The main gray courthouse was finished in 1940 and currently houses the county DA offices and some state court staff. And then the red brick courthouse that was completed in 1977 and has undergone extensive renovations. Are those 3 buildings there. And the thought of expanding the red brick courthouse was first included in the 2003 facilities master plan and was kind of imagined as a 5-story building. So fast forward to 2021, we got word that 2 new judges were going to be appointed to the circuit court. And so planning for the expansion became a focus for the county. That 2021 original concept drawing Uses a similar red brick facade and envisioned a 40,000 foot expansion. The goal then was to start construction in 2021 when the judges were being added, with a completion date approximately a year and a half later. Those red brick concepts were refined through the design process into the concept drawing that you see here. The new 3-story expansion will be 50,933 square feet. Get that number right? All right, good job. And have all the elements of a modern courthouse. Additional security features, segregated entrances and pathways between staff, visitors, and persons in custody, and also expanded administrative offices, as well as, of course, the 2 new courtrooms. So that's the background. The audit assessed the effectiveness of the county in managing the $44 million project before construction fully gets underway. So this included 3 phases: assembling a project team. So the project team was needed because the county chose to go with a construction manager, general contractor approach. So that's the architect and the contractor work in conjunction all the way through design phase and construction. The county also hired an owner's rep, or owner's representative, I'll call him the rep, with expertise in complex construction design or construction management. As kind of an assistant. The second phase was the design phase. I already alluded to that a little bit. And then the third would be the permitting process for the project. So to measure the effectiveness, we selected the Project Management Institute's Project Management Body of Knowledge. That's a mouthful. And that's a standard for evaluation. The body of knowledge is divided into 12 key principles, ranging from diligent stewardship to embracing adaptability. It's widely recognized as the best practice for any project, not necessarily just construction. Although there's several other standards out there that are specific to construction management. And I mentioned the price tag. The estimated price tag was currently 44 million. But of course, the estimate has changed a lot between the original 2021 40,000 square foot red brick building to the current concept. The kind of the weird up and down there that the BOCC design approval, the board initially signed off on a 4-floor concept, keeping both the 3rd floor and the 4th floor unfinished, but then after sleeping on it a bit, rescinded that decision and approved a 3-story design, which is why you see the uptick and then the reduction in the winter of 2022, with a slight gain up to our current estimate due to further refinements and inflation with costs of construction. When it comes to the assessment, the results highlighted a lot of successes with managing the construction project. Both Lee and Eric have a lot of experience and knowledge in construction. Also, having an owner's rep that serves kind of in a fiduciary role for the county brought a lot of expertise to the table. So the only areas of project management that were identified to have some room to improve were numbers 9 and 10, which were navigating complexity and optimizing risk response. We saw the delays from the initial schedule as kind of the byproduct of the complexity of the project and the size of the stakeholder group involved. When it came to permitting phase, there, the 3rd one down, the city gave some false assurances that the permits would be issued quickly. Project team put forth extra efforts and early engagement with the city, hoping to pave the way for a speedy turnaround. That didn't happen. The project team kind of continued to adjust the schedule based on the promises of city officials. We felt like the team could have done a better job to properly anticipate the risks of the regulatory environment that we were working in, that it could hold up the project to the extent that it has. One risk management approach, which is a risk register, was put forth by the owner's rep during the RFP process, but wasn't carried through. Risk analysis should have included the possibility of various outcomes in these delays. The team and the city were able to get underway with some early work projects that are seen in kind of the light blue, including removing the AJ Tucker building, moving the courthouse entrance to a temporary location and some demolition. But the original 37-month project will stretch probably close to 4 years. And one of the other gaps in oversight was around roles and responsibilities of the owner's representative. Because the representative function is on the owner's behalf, there can be a bit of a blurring about who's in charge and making decisions. RFP for the owner's rep had a very clearly identified roles, but those weren't carried over to the contract. Management, Lee and Eric have reported no issues with conflicts in this area. There hasn't been any decisions made without their consent, but it was just an area of contractual liability for the county. Some of the causes that we saw were really the amount of expertise in the room. They've probably forgotten more about construction than I'll ever know. But when you get too reliant just on your own expertise, there's the possibility of overlooking every angle. The department also doesn't have any documented policies and procedures covering construction project management. And despite their 2010 audit recommendation to develop them, but that was prior to both Lee and Eric being with the county. So our recommendation was to address those causes were to implement a construction management framework and then help guide the development of some policies and procedures, closing any gaps in planning that may have been overlooked. They agreed with these recommendations and they're again, we're ahead of us. The department, they were already in the process of creating procedures during the audit. The next area we looked at as part of the assessment was around contracting. The current contract in place describes costs associated with labor and material in a way that doesn't provide details to account for some of the common contractor. They're not here, so I'll call it profit boosting areas. These are things like small tools and consumables, rental equipment, offsite storage costs, how they pass rebates or discounts that they may receive to the owner, how they handle scrap or excess materials. Other areas, just for clarity in the contract, could be a reallocation of cost underruns, so you don't end up paying as much as you had anticipated. How that extra money could then be used on other parts of the project. Notification when they're going to use contingency funds. How to handle subcontracts when you have limited bids. That was the case for one of our subcontractors. And then the piece that I didn't include in the slides, which I should have, but it's because it's an important concept, is equity in contracting. When the project team was assembled, every one of the respondents, from the owner's rep to the architect to the actual contractor, had to include information about how they were addressing equity in public contracting. These proposals were scored using that information to determine the award, but that's kind of where we stopped. Several other jurisdictions that I looked at had language about equity in subcontracting as well as in their contracts. Some had extensive equity policies and goals around equity. Others just were as simple as reporting on how many certified underrepresented businesses were included on the project. So was an important piece that I missed on the slides. So our recommendation in this area was to coordinate with legal to create some templated contracts and general condition documents for future use. That should result in more transparency for construction contractors, costs, and equity initiatives. Management agreed and will work with legal to create some stronger contract templates and general conditions going forward. And lucky for me, Lee and Eric, we get to come back and revisit the project once again when it's a little bit closer to being finished sometime in 2026. Lee, Eric, any comments on anything that I said or any of the process at all?
I think,
or?
it was a in-depth process. I think you managed to condense months worth of work into a limited number of slides. But I would like to thank Aaron and Elizabeth for their work in reviewing all those documents. And Eric spent a great deal of time in compiling the documents, as you can imagine, with 3 separate procurements plus early work packages. extensive number of stakeholder meetings, interactions with the city. There was a lot of documentation to review. Eric spent a lot of time putting that documentation together, packaging it, as well as Jeanette in our office, and providing it to the auditors for them to look at. So it's a time-intensive process, but I think there's some good recommendations that came out of it that we'll be working over the next 6 to 9 months to complete and put into practice.
Anybody else, committee?
Obviously a really big, important, expensive project, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason it made it on the audit plan, right? It's.
How's the architect's involvement been? Ben,
I promised Eric I wouldn't send him all the questions. That is a good question for Eric.
Yeah,
and limited, involved, or?
no, they've been very involved. LRS Architects, their principal who's on the project, Paul Boundy, has decades of experience in designing public facilities and courthouses. So, I mean, any meeting you have with State Forest or the Sheriff's Office, they're involved. So, yeah.
It's a pretty substantial cost or not? In the grand scheme of things,
For them to do the work,
for the architect to be involved throughout the construction process. Because you can have the architect not involved in the construction process as an option, right?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say on this size of project, because the design part is so intensive, the construction administration portion of the contract is actually pretty small by comparison. We find that on smaller projects, there's greater savings when we limit that construction administration, say if it's not a design heavy project like a tenant improvement or something. And the construction administration part is fairly straightforward. Then we'll kind of limit that in the contract. In this case, with the construction being really complex, we didn't seek to limit the construction administration part of their contract. We could find that information. It's clearly itemized in their billings and in their scope of work contract attachment to the contract. But as a portion of the overall contract, it's maybe 10%, Eric?
that's probably about right. Yeah, and this morning, actually, I was talking with our owner's rep about looking at their billings so far through construction. They've got one person 100% of the time, one person about 25% of the time. Going forward, we're looking at how to limit that as they get through submittals and kind of the early stuff in construction, making sure that they're not just spending 100% of their time because they can, but make sure that their time is well spent. We'll keep monitoring that.
You guys anticipated this being a place for public demonstrations? And are there any accommodations to that? Because I'm just guessing it will be.
So I don't know if you can pull up that rendering again. But
Elizabeth.
you're all very familiar with that street and Bond Street.
Yeah.
So the parking, the slant-in parking from the corner up to the existing entrance is all going away and being incorporated into the right of way. So the short answer is yes, it was explicitly thought about. And so the goal was to create almost a kind of public square courtyard, obviously not square, but to create space for that very reason. And to even now, yeah, you can see, so you see the main sign. There's 15 to 20 feet between the main sign and the wall. Currently, up against, the building to the north, you can barely walk 3 people up that sidewalk shoulder to shoulder. So there's probably 4 or 5 times that amount of space, but that's a good question. It was kind of specifically included to try and create some openness there and create a space where as people come out of the courthouse, they have some final discussions, they can kind of gain some distance between small groups and have some closing discussions as they're on their way.
And during programming, you guys worked with Homeland Security, right? To kind of identify some areas where you.
Yeah, so that's the other thing
specific pieces.
you'll notice are the planters there. Those are actually designed as vehicle barriers. We've been working through some design challenges with a water line. So that's going to look slightly different once we finish that design. But again, we were able to incorporate some of the Homeland Security recommendations for security.
And those are posts, concrete deep set posts in the
Yeah, those will meet, there's a specific GSA standard for the size and depth and the distance. Typically 42, not greater than 42 inches apart. So any of the bollards there meet those standards.
Thank you. The question I have is I understand what you anticipate or don't anticipate or what you project for the regulatory environment, having worked in that in the past. But the one variable that you did have that I don't think it was unknown kind of going in was the redesign of Greenwood. And I'm just curious what role that might have had, because I don't think the city had even decided on that when you were going through all the initial planning and then the decisions made as you're in the middle of it. So that's not regulatory, that's infrastructure. So I'm just curious
Right.
what role that might have had in either in your process and or in the audit report, which I'm sorry, I have not yet reviewed.
I can think of a couple specific kind of design related items, but Eric, do you have something to add first?
Not specifically, I mean, I guess the curb line that we planned on remained as it is today, even with the Greenwood improvements. So I don't know that the lane changes and the parking didn't impact our design necessarily.
I don't think we ended up with significant changes, but there was some added coordination because we had a final design and then we were following those neighborhood meetings and attending them. And there hadn't been up to that point, there hadn't been conversation between the city's community development department reviewing our plans and the city's streets and construction team. And so the construction team, it became aware, wasn't really aware of what we had already been approved to do on Greenwood. And so there was some kind of last minute scrambling a little bit at a high level to make sure it got coordinated, but it turns out there weren't really big impacts.
Yeah, thank you. And I didn't know there'd be design changes, but I was thinking more in terms of the timing and the
Yeah.
coordination and just.
And there were some things like we had already agreed, or the city and CET had agreed to move a bus stop for security reasons. And some other items like that had been agreed upon, but hadn't necessarily been fully incorporated into the new Greenwood.
We are having to change or the contractors having to change their sequencing on abandoning utilities out in Greenwood. Now that those pedestrian medians are in place, which they weren't before, we're gonna have to kind of work around that and close lanes in a different number of phases than they had anticipated, but we're working with the city to coordinate that.
Okay, anything else? On to the next one. Health benefits program, increase in medical costs.
This is a presentation of the health benefits audit that we did. I want to also thank the staff who helped me out on this. Trigby sitting in the back was very helpful. And gave me a lot of data and it was pretty seamless, very easy to get data. So I do appreciate that. Background. There's a lot of people involved in this program, so it's kind of not just human resources, who is the main auditee, but there's also a benefits advisory committee that's involved in planning for costs and budgeting for the program. The finance department is involved, the administrative department's involved, the county commissioners are involved in setting the budget. Kind of on the strictly implementation side, there are two contractors involved. Pacific Source is our third-party health benefits administrator, and then Davidson provides health benefits consulting to the county to help them administer the program. And then human resources is kind of in the middle, they do everything. This chart shows kind of the context of where we're coming from and why we're doing the audit. You can see that for a long time, the county hadn't had really high increases in the health and the cost of health benefits. There was only a 3% annual change year on year. That changed a lot in fiscal year 2021. Since fiscal year 2021, there's been a 13% annual change. So part of the context of doing this audit was that the risk profile had changed because the costs had increased so much. Our audit objective was to determine whether human resources staff oversaw the medical health benefits program to control costs and ensure that members receive the best service. To do that, we took a look at the claims data for the county. Got all of the claims coming in and looked at trends within that. We looked at reporting from specific source. We asked for reports related to performance and also their internal controls. And we also checked the payments that the county made to Pacific Source to the invoices and the claims data backing this up. Our findings and recommendations. So the first finding was related to the Health Benefits Fund Reserve policy. So the county has a policy because it's a self-insured program. State law requires us to keep a certain amount in reserve in order to pay any outstanding claims that haven't been paid for yet. So that's that bottom line, the claims reserve. Then the Board of Commissioners has adopted an additional sort of balance that needs to be held called the contingency that's based on the claims reserve. And that's there to kind of pay for any unanticipated large expenses that might come up. And that's at about 8 million. And the fund balance, though, over this time period is the green line, started out at $18 million in March of 2019. And had fallen to $3.4 million in June of 2024 when we finished the audit. That has probably changed since then, and this is just during the audit period. So some of the things that you can see is that the sort of the big drop starts in March of 2022. You see that drop from probably about 16 million down to maybe 7, whatever it is, higher above $15 million, down pretty steeply. And then it wasn't until December of 2022 that policymakers started saying, maybe we need to increase these rates. They hadn't increased charges to departments or employees for years. And so that was sort of the first time discussions happened. And then again, you see after that, there's another big decrease, but they weren't actually able to implement those changes until June of 2023. And that lag time happens because the budget cycle takes about 18 months for implementation. And then also you can't really make plan changes, including charges to employees until the open enrollment period happens. So, and that happens only on an annual basis. So we made a recommendation based on this to HR and administration to conduct a root cause analysis to kind of figure out if there was anything that they could have done given the context of rising health claims across the country to have been more proactive or react faster in order to keep that fund balance up above the required levels. And they agreed to that and are going to conduct that root cause analysis and after action report. Our next finding was related to data security. So as we were conducting the audit, we asked for some claims data from Pacific Source. Aaron and I got our HIPAA certification, we took our trainings. We set up a secure server with IT in order to get the data. It's pretty sensitive data. It not only includes every person who's received health service on our plans, birth date, social security number, name, but it also includes, any medical procedures that they've been through. So that can be pretty sensitive. When we got the data, we found out that it seemed that Pacific Source hadn't put a filter on it, and we got data that was for maybe all their customers. I don't know. I think it was over 4,000 different customers, including Legacy Health, maybe, City of Eugene. Legacy Health and Oregon State University. So we had all of their things. When we let them know right in a way, hey, this isn't what we asked for. They asked us to delete it. We did so, no data got out. We were both had signed our certificates that we wouldn't share data. So it wasn't like there was a breach, but it still made us wonder, what are their internal controls in order to protect data? And then when we asked them for that information, they provided some information, yes, we made a mistake, we're increasing training, that kind of stuff. But they didn't really tell us what had happened exactly and how they intended to fix it. They also we asked them, and hey, did you tell City of Eugene, Legacy Health, that we saw their data? And they wouldn't tell us that either. We asked to see some reporting from them called Service Organization Controls Reporting, which is a review that independent auditors will conduct of an organization's technology controls, going in to see how the systems of controls are designed, whether they're functioning properly, whether they're being implemented properly, and then also and then they produce a report, and the organization can provide that to their customers to kind of have some assurance that their data is being properly managed. Pacific Source doesn't have one of these. Instead, they have what they call what's called a high trust certificate. And the difference between these two is the high trust certificate is just the certificate. We just know that they've passed that review. Whereas the Service Organization Controls Reporting would really give us an outline of all the controls that are in place, how they're functioning, and also what controls they expected us to be implementing. We recommended that Human Resources negotiate with Pacific Source to get a service organization control report, and then review the report, follow up with them on any non-functioning controls. Human Resources said, we are comfortable with the high trust certificate. That's going to be more complicated. We might do that in the next contract, but that's not something we're going to do in the near term, and accepted the risk there. The next set of findings was related to performance reporting. Performance reporting is pretty typical amongst third-party administrators, and in fact, there's sort of nationally accepted benchmarks that everyone can kind of refer to. The past audits that David did of the health benefits program, the 2004 audit, he came up with those performance measures himself based on data the third-party administrator was able to share then. In 2008, the third-party administrator was sharing that data with the county, and there were actually performance incentives in the contract associated with reaching benchmarks. When we asked Pacific Source for this information, they didn't have it. They weren't regularly reporting it to the county. They provided us with these numbers, but this is all for their entire business. This isn't just for Deschutes County. So we recommended that in the next contract that the county start asking Pacific Source for performance related information related just to Deschutes County. Human Resources agreed, and they've asked Pacific Source for that information, and Pacific Source is going to start providing it. And then the final finding was just based on that review of payments from the county to Pacific Source. So what we did is we took a look at all of the payments that the county had made to Pacific Source, matched those up to the invoices that had come in, and then took a look at the invoices and matched that up to the claims data to see if there were actually the number of claims to support the invoices the county received. That review went really well. We didn't see any exceptions. So we're really confident that the county is paying Pacific Source appropriately. But what we didn't see was any procedures related to how that process, any documented procedures related to how that should happen. One of the reasons it's more important to have documented procedures in this case is there's a really quick turnaround time because Pacific Source is paying providers before the county pays Pacific Source. And so they make these payments on a special check run, not the regular payments, because it needs to have that really quick turnaround time. So we think that pressure for turnaround plus the amount of these payments makes the risk higher, elevating the need for procedures, documented procedures. The county agreed and they're working on putting these procedures together. And that's it. The audit. And Jason is also online. Either of you want to say anything?
No, I think we're very happy that we conducted this and take corrective action.
Agreed. I don't have much to add to Elizabeth's presentation.
Questions? Was Civic Source the TPA during the 04 and 08 audits?
No.
Something else, okay.
Yeah, there's been different TPAs for all of those audits. Sort of growing in sophistication, so when the 2004 audit happened, it was someone, in Bend who was very local. They could just walk into their office.
Yeah.
Is it accurate to say that that precipitous drop that we saw around 2021 was fairly common across the country coming out of COVID? It wasn't unique to.
I think the
healthcare area.
increase in costs was common. Yeah.
So those 13% annual increases that's consistent with the industry form.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And that, I think one of the things that made this harder to react to is when costs first started increasing, people thought, oh, well, this is just coming after the COVID pandemic. This has been pent up demand. But that has proved to not be the case and that there really is just increasing healthcare costs.
Tree or Jason, are there a couple, 2 or 3 drivers that?
Yeah, so on medical claims, one of the big drivers was we typically don't see more than, say, one really high dollar claim. And when I say high dollar claim, I'm talking like $500,000 for a claim, which could be like a transplant or a severe accident where somebody's spending months in the hospital. We were typically only seeing maybe one of those a year. We now had in the last couple of years, we've seen several of those. One is just an ongoing one. It's due to a prescription that's very, very expensive, costs our plan a lot of money. And then we had some really big, just significant claims that hit. And then we've seen the average cost of claims just skyrocket over the last couple of years. And that, has to do with inflation, has to do with kind of having a lock on the market here in Central Oregon. We have one hospital system, so they've really increased their costs significantly as well. And then the second part of that is our drug costs. There's just a lot of new drugs out there on the market that are very effective and work really well, but they're very expensive. So, and right now there's no generic or alternative to those. And as soon as we identify those, we try to move people to the less expensive ones, but there's just, it's just significantly higher drug and medical claims costs particularly.
I think Jason had his hand up.
Jason, someone. Jason,
Oh, no, someone else.
Summer?
someone, hand up, someone.
Hey,
Summer?
everyone. Yeah,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. I would love to hear from Robert, if that's okay. To understand, like, Robert, where do you sit with this? Where does this funding issue sit with you on, like, in terms of priorities or your level of concern? How much heartburn is the status of this reserve giving you?
Yeah, thank you, Summer, for the question. This has been an issue that not only HR, but finance has been dealing with over the last couple budget cycles, certainly. And has for the last 2 years in a row, when we go through the budget process, we set assumptions for the following fiscal year in December. And so we for the last 2 years, we have set a, say a 15%, 11% 1 year, 15% increase we'd expect in the following year for 2 years in a row. Well, then by the time we get closer to seeing where actual numbers end up at the end of the fiscal year, they were coming in a lot higher than the data and the trends have showed in the past. So then for the last 2 years, we've had to do and charge departments an additional fee on top of what we had budgeted, 15% each year for the last 2 years over the budgeted amount. And so we have been watching this closely because yes, we have been concerned about the drop in the fund balance, the drop in the reserve in the fund, but we've been trying to be proactive in it. And in fact, that's why even this year, working with the EBAC, the Employee Benefit Advisory Committee, looking at ways to adjust the plan for the ongoing financial sustainability of the benefit plan itself. So looking at that, looking at cost increases to departments. Last year, employees implemented a small increase as well to what they pay to contribute to it. So yeah, we've been monitoring this and it is important to the commissioners as well. It showed up comments in our audit as well, just not in a negative sense, but just as for an awareness that this fund has decreased the fund balance. Lastly, it's important to note, back when it had an $18 million reserve for a number of years, the reason why rates weren't increased because at the time, the budget committee, the commissioners thought that that reserve was too high. And so that's why they were purposely not increasing rates to draw down the reserve. Well, unfortunately, that's when COVID and inflation, increased costs all came to head at the same time. And it definitely drew down that reserve. So now we're on the proactive path of bringing it back up. We did end last year, fiscal year 24, at $1 million more than we were anticipating, which was good news for us. So we're back up to 4 million now. And by the end of this year, we are projecting back up to 8 million. And so we are projecting costs for the next 2 years should be more modest as far as increases. So we think we're on the right path now, barring any major disruption in the future.
Thank you.
Can I just share, just because I'm the budget officer as well, and I work very closely with both our CFO and the board. The reason the finances is a concern, but what gives me the confidence is that the Board of Commissioners is so committed to addressing this and in short order. And so both summers, both last summer and then this past summer, we've gone to the board in July and August to ask for these increases to departments, and they have immediately supported that. The departments who took a big hit, so many of the departments are here in this room right now, embraced it. They understood it. They don't like it because it's a major impact, but they were real partners in helping implement this. And then EBAC as well. And Melinda Campbell's here with us. Thank you for being here. Our employees have as well. And so this has been a really collaborative effort, recognizing that we're all in this together. Nobody wants to see this go down. Everybody wants to see the plan and everything remain healthy. And those are just not the circumstances that we're in. But I just feel really, really good about where we are as an organization, from the board to the department heads to the employees, to really be determined to address this together.
Is there a target amount for the reserve? Is there a number that you kind of want to?
$8 million is the target, right? And we do, the current projections does show us getting back up to that, up for a couple of years and then down. But again, we know how volatile this fund is, so that's why we are closely monitoring it.
And in general, are we comfortable with Pacific Source as an administrator?
We are currently, that contract does end at the end of 2025. So we are anticipating probably going out for RFP on that next year for the 2026 plan year.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Just one comment on the very last slide. It mentions the survey. You review the report. Don't forget to take the survey. It only takes a few minutes to do, so. Thanks, Daryl. Go ahead and take the leaves. I forget every now and then too. Don't forget, it just takes a minute to do. Okay.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Daryl, we're gonna steer from the event agenda real quick and swap our peer review results ahead of the status report, just because one of the peer reviewers is online joining us.
All right, let's do that.
I'll just introduce Larry, is joining us from Clark County, Washington. He was one of our peer review team. We were just peer reviewed last week. He's gonna explain what that means.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I'm leaning closer to the laptop, like it makes a difference for you, but it helps me. Yeah, so as Elizabeth mentioned, I am Larry Stafford. I am the Audit Services Manager from Clark County, Washington, and I was the team lead on the external peer review of Deschutes County's Office of Internal Audit. So happy to be here today to share with you the results. Want to just do a little bit of background first. The county code there requires the audit function to comply with government auditing standards, which you see on the slide before you. That's affectionately referred to as the Yellow Book, and that should seem pretty obvious why the reason that is. But those standards require that you obtain an external peer review every 3 years. And through that, the office is a member of the Association of Local Government Auditors, and one of the member benefits of being part of ALGA is that you can participate in peer reviews with people from across the nation. And we're very proud of that. I've been a member of ALGA for a number of years. I've been on a number of committees and was happy to serve on their board. And the 2018 revision of the Yellow Book that you see in front of you actually mentions the ALGA peer review program by name. We're one of a few named in government auditing standards as meeting the rigorous requirements of an external peer review. And if you don't use a function like ALGA, then you should meet those same rigorous standards that are inside the Yellow Book for a peer review. So the Yellow Book itself talks about a number of these standards and values that you see on the slide in front of you. I want to highlight just a few of them. Independence is extremely important for auditors. And I would even extend that to the peer review team. There's 3 phases broadly of a peer review process. The first one is preparation, which includes team assembly. And as part of that, you volunteer to be on the peer review team, and ALGA, the peer review committee, evaluates your independence to go into another organization and look at their audit work. And so that happened. Jennifer Lim was the other team member on the peer review. And so they evaluated our history with Elizabeth and Aaron and the Deschutes County audit function. And, I've seen both of them present at national and regional conferences, but I have not worked with either of them in any audit office or even on any audit projects or ALGA functions for that matter. So, they evaluate our independence even as peer reviewers, but that's because the Yellow Book places such a high value on independence for auditors as a whole. There's a number of other items that are evaluated as part of that preparation process. Elizabeth shared the policies and procedures of the office with the team, and we did go through and evaluate the policies and procedures and the county code and the connection between the two with regards to a number of these items. So the second step in that process is to move on to the field site work, where we actually come on and test the quality control standards that you see there. Just a slide a moment ago. Those quality control standards really are the purpose and function of the peer review process. So the purpose of a peer review is to assess the system of quality control in the audit office to determine if they're suitably designed to provide reasonable assurance of compliance with the standards. And if you folks have worked with auditors at any length, you'll never hear an auditor say everything's great or everything's fine, right? We're about reducing risk, putting controls in place, and the same thing goes for the audit function. So the quality control standards, a number of them are listed here. Again, I'll highlight just a couple of them in particular. Annual independence and compliance statements. So there's a framework for assessing independence in the government auditing standards, and that's used for a number of reasons. The Yellow Book's very interesting in that it will tell you it only covers financial statement audits, attestation audits, and performance audits, but it covers an auditor's independence with regards to every other piece of work that they do, so they can still perform those other 3 types of audits and be independent when they do those. Another area just wanted to touch on the minimum qualifications for staff. There are competence requirements, and there's elements of the Yellow Book that requires a certain amount of continuing education, like many professions, but it calls out specifically government-related education, and then government-related education could include just about anything that's under audit. So even things that don't seem normal, perhaps if you have a golf course, for example, a municipal golf course, and you're studying golf course operations, it could look very interesting to someone from the outside. But if you were auditing that government program, then it is very much government related for those auditors. So again, the review team itself, I mentioned this briefly. I did not mention Lyndon, who is the peer review coordinator. He's a member of the peer review committee. He's a city auditor in Virginia Beach. And so that is the person to whom Jennifer and I reported during the week, and also coordinated a lot of our work. And then above Lyndon is the peer review committee, who has actually put together and promulgated a peer review guide for government auditing standards, the Yellow Book peer review guide, which is the document that we followed when we came through and executed the peer review. Right. So as I mentioned, the peer review objectives: testing the systems of quality control and to see if there was reasonable assurance of compliance during the peer review period. And that includes testing the policies and procedures, the continuing education. And then again, that's the first phase, the preparatory portion of the audit. When we come on site, we really do start looking at audits. We got a complete list of the engagements completed during the period. We performed a sample selection to provide broad coverage of the different auditors, the different types of audits, the different size of audits, the larger ones and some of the smaller ones. And from that, we actually went through and pulled out engagement work papers. We looked at evidence gathered. We looked at the memos and the communications between the audit staff and those under review during those audits, to evaluate how well they complied with the standards. And then we also conducted interviews on site with a number of folks. I believe we spoke with the county administrator, the county manager, as well as one of your members of your audit oversight committee. And we thank both of them for their time and the insight that they provided to the audit process. So there's 3 possible results: pass with deficiencies, or fail. Happy to report that the office received a pass rating. And again, that comes with a typical audit caveat that we really are talking about. We're not saying that they complied in every audit and every time, but that there was reasonable assurance that the work during the period complied with government auditing standards and the legal regulatory requirements for the engagements during the period under review, which was July of, you have to remind me here, I don't have it in front of me, July.
21, I think. Yeah, 21. 21 to
Yes,
20.
July 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2024. So we also understood there was some transition in the office and a new auditor appointed, which I'll just note makes it especially challenging for the audit function and those being audited, because there can be changes in processes and procedures during that time. And but with that, we still believe there was reasonable assurance of compliance. So in addition to just the rating on the peer review, Part of our responsibility is to highlight areas that may pose additional risks to the compliance of the office. And in this case, we did note in looking through the county code that there's a section that requires department heads to be members of the Audit Oversight Committee. And it appears that in two different sections of the code mentions the audit schedule. And one talks about the audit schedule being submitted for approval to the Audit Oversight Committee. And another section of the county code mentions that the schedule or proposed schedule must be submitted for review to the committee. So we did highlight in this management letter that there is a potential for a conflict of interest with those members who have departments that may be subject to the audit schedule in one way or another. But we also noticed that the county code calls out and says specifically that those members should avoid voting on any issues related to their departments. So it's clear your legislative members have identified that potential conflict of interest. We did review the minutes of the meetings from the Audit Oversight Committee and did not identify any issues of that conflict of interest arising or where it was noted. And it didn't seem to impact the audits that we reviewed in our sample. So again, we didn't see that it affected the compliance of the office in any way. We just noted it as a potential threat to that compliance under the independent standards. And so we wanted to call that to the attention of the auditor. And we did make a recommendation that they develop a standard way. And actually, this is the letter you see in front of you is actually from the prior peer review.
Yeah, I actually put these slides together before you finished, so that's why.
That's okay. I'll just note for the committee, the recommendation our team issued was that the auditor develop a process to identify for the committee any instances where those department heads may have a potential conflict of interest appearing in front of them on the agenda. And so that's just a way to help ensure the committee complies with county code and that the auditor is doing everything they can to remain independent on those particular topics and avoid any conflicts of interest that may influence the selection of the audit, the scope or objectives of those audits.
We also had a chance to respond to that letter. So we accepted that recommendation. One of the things I thought, since we're working on the bylaws, that might be a good place to have to document how we'll deal with recusals for department heads and when that should happen, how that should happen. Like today, we made a mention that he was going to recuse himself as an audit committee member during the discussion of the construction audit. So Nancy's probably noting that in the minutes. So that's how we intend to react to that.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, if I might, I know the letter that we issued wasn't shared there. I hope the committee gets it. I do want to note that there was two areas that we highlighted where the office is particularly strong, in our opinion. And again, you don't typically hear a lot of great things from auditors, but we do try and be objective in our work, even on peer reviews. And we did note that there's a very high quality of work occurring in and coming out of the Office of the Internal Audit. And that's highlighted by the fact that the office received a Knighton Award in both 2022 and 2023. And for those of you not familiar, that's a national award where one and possibly up to three of those awards are given each year. And their organizations are grouped by size, so it's a little bit more even. So they're not competing against organizations with 40 auditors. But that is quite telling that their peers found that and issued those awards. And also we noted the depth that they go through to familiarize themselves with the topics that they audit. I know there was some FEMA training that was attended, the continuity of operations audit. And it's really incredible how much effort they put into completely understanding the topics that they audit and go through so that they can do the best job possible. And I think that's evident. We saw that in a lot of the communications, the emails during those audits, and that one in particular. So we wanted to recognize the office for those efforts.
Thanks, Larry. Does anyone have questions for me or Larry about the peer review process?
Anyone? And,
Go ahead, Summer.
so,
Hey there. Thank you. So
Yeah.
does, Larry, does the peer review include follow-up on prior peer review suggestions?
Yeah, great question. And so that is a requirement that the peer review team looks back at prior peer reviews. And we did evaluate the prior peer review. There was the one recommendation, and it's actually in that letter that Elizabeth had shown on the slide. And I don't know if you can pull that back up or not, Elizabeth, or read that out. But we did find that they had addressed the recommendation issued in the prior one. And again, the prior peer review, they received a rating of pass on that peer review as well. But there was one item in the management letter, just a recommendation that they work on. And I can.
The prior
It had to do with-
recommendation was, that we weren't documenting that we had asked management, for audits if there were any, related legal proceedings or, litigation. And so we, kind of made a more, we've been documenting that process better.
Yeah, and we saw that both in email communications and as part of the standard entrance agenda for the office now.
Great, thank you.
anything else? All right,
Thank you, Larry.
thanks, Larry.
All right, thank you all.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you to
Yep.
staff and the peer reviewer. I'm so excited that we got this done again, and the results. So thank you everyone for what you put into this. I feel much more confident as an audit committee member in what our internal audit function is doing. Not that I wasn't confident before, but this is just another way to go.
Thanks, Summer.
Thank you. Status report.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if you want to do the status report, should take like 2 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, and then we're back on track. But yeah, I know you guys have to leave as well, so I want to. Yeah, they said they need about 20 minutes for theirs. We'll just do the status report.
Yeah, it should be quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Here's the status report, showing, where we spent our time over the past 2 months. And then also just to give you an update on, what we worked on and what we'll be working on. We finished the Fair and Expo recreational vehicle audit. We finished the health benefits program audit. We finished the courthouse pre-construction management audit. We have kicked off a translation and interpretation audit. That's in our fieldwork stages. That's going to be looking at how the county as a whole complies with federal regulations related to providing translation and interpretation, and also how effectively those services, effectively and efficiently those services are offered. Aaron's also working on an integrated audit of our public health group. That'll be very similar to the audits. You've been seeing the RV park audit we just did. We did one on the legal department. We did one on the clerk's office. So we're just following our standard audit steps on that. And then we're in the planning stages of an audit of fair alcohol sales. So the county fair alcohol sales, looking at an audit of that process. We are, I think the follow-up work is from last time.
Yeah, I think it just snuck in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yep, and then just other, kind of miscellaneous thing we're doing. We also, Aaron and I are attending an Oregon Audit Summit next week, so we'll have 2 days of training over in the valley with some of our colleagues across the city. So, any questions on what we've been doing?
You guys may have noticed now with our new 2-month timeline for meetings, it's now a 2-month compared to a 12-month. It was quarterly compared to a year. So timing has changed a little bit, which is why some of those numbers may skew a little bit more broadly than.
Yeah, I was looking at the hotline
I'll stop.
time, the time spent on the hotline. Can you say
Yeah.
more about that?
Yes, I can. We have a case that's wrapping up. We're kind of trying to get some last few interviews in, but it's really close to wrapping up, and I'll be able to talk to you about that probably next time. We also had a case that was not substantiated related to the Fair and Expo Center. There was a question of a conflict of interest or someone that secondary employment over there that was not substantiated. Oh, and then there was a tip that came in that to the whistleblower program that wasn't related to fraud, waste, and abuse that we passed over to HR that was related to compensation.
Great, thank you.
Are you able to share?
Post disabled participating screen sharing.
Usually go to their like little dots on their. Sure, you can like make host or.
I did email it to you if that's easier to snag it, but.
Make a co-host.
Make co-host. Right there, like down, make host, make co-host, you should be.
All right.
Internal controls.
So thank you for having us. Elizabeth had asked us if we wanted to share, or we're able to share some of the internal controls that we have in the finance department. So at the last meeting, y'all selected procurement AP. So we're not gonna walk you through vendors all the way to AP. Banking is like a separate topic if we want to go there on another time, but Heather's gonna kick off.
Yep, so I'm Heather Herath, the new procurement manager for the county. I've been here for about 5 months. Coming most recently from the city of Bend. Worked in procurement there for about 9 years. Then have Jenna with me.
Controller for 3.5 years now.
Yep, as Jenna mentioned, we're gonna be going over our internal controls in finance regarding vendors, purchase orders and contracts, accounts payable, and also P cards. Okay, so this is actually a pretty silly picture, but we really face a real threat around vendor fraud and essentially theft. Finance receives several vendor update requests every single day. We're constantly having to change our vendors for changing addresses or banking information. So finance is the county's first line of defense. Bad actors are looking for the opportunity to fraudulently change their information and replace their information with the vendor information and with the existing information in order to divert payments intended to the vendor. We've seen this in action firsthand, and our practices have actually started quite a few attempts for that. Some of the vendors that are often targeted are, for example, our big projects like the courthouse expansion, where we have a large contract that is very well known, and bad actors will actually try and use those large construction projects where a single payment can be over $1 million. So here's a bit of data around fraud put out by the Association for Financial Professionals. So 80% of the organizations they surveyed reported fraud attempts. Of those 80%, only 30% were unsuccessful in receiving. My goodness. Try again. Of those organizations, only 30% were unable to successfully recover those lost funds. 41% of the organizations were actually able to recover funds of at least 75%. So something that I find interesting about this information is that checks actually continue to be the payment method that's most vulnerable to fraud. And 65 respondents reporting that their organizations face fraud attacks. So for internal controls here at the county, what are we doing to mitigate this risk? So we have pretty extensive vendor checks that we pretty extensive vendor checks. Checklists for entering new vendors, updating existing vendors. And we have vendor applications that must be completed, ACH applications that they would have to make. And also for any ACH updates, we actually physically contact an existing individual at that organization and not the person that's asking for us to make that change. So for new vendor entry, we have checklists. We check the IRS website, which is a federal website, make sure that we have a signed W-9 on file, their vendor application, then check the SAM's website, which is another federal website, and then Secretary of State for Oregon and for, or another state if they're outside of Oregon. So you can see that's a lot of checks that we do to make sure that we're making sure that we're checking what we need to. Then for updating vendors, we have a similar process. We do a lot of all of those similar checks, including making sure we have updated applications on file. If the current vendor has an outdated application of over 2 years, we'll actually go and ask for a new application. And so that's why sometimes when people are asking us to update vendors, it takes a little bit of time because we are really, really in-depthly checking to try and make sure that we're preventing fraud with the county. So additional internal vendor controls, you can, oops. But we do have really good separation of duties. Oh, here we go. For our vendor entries. So the department initiates the new entries. So they'll be responsible for collecting the vendor application, the W-9, and if any banking information is required. And they will start that entry into our ERP system. Our senior accounting techs, they're checking for accuracy to make sure that that the initial entry is correct. And then they're adding the social security number or the tax ID. And then they're changing any of they would be the ones that would change and verify that banking information. And then as the procurement manager, I'm our final check on that. I check every single vendor entry that is processed. And so I'm the final reviewer for all of those. All right, let's switch gears just a little bit. Okay. So what are the risks around our purchase orders? So purchase orders are what we send to vendors to tell them that we want to purchase something from them. So we're really trying to be fiscally responsible with taxpayers' money. So to do that, we're looking to meet the state procurement law and making sure we're following that, making sure we get 3 quotes when we need to. A risk that can be on a purchase order is a lack of detail. If we don't tell the vendor exactly what we want, then we may not get what we're asking for. Other risks that we can run into is entry error, including selecting the wrong vendor when they're doing the entry or an incorrect amount. And then a final thing that we're making sure that we don't do is paying an So again, with all of our entries, we are looking to have separation of duties. So, oh, here we go. Employees enter the requisitions and that's the, hey, I need to buy this item. And then requisitions are worked in or released into workflow. And the people that approve the requisitions start with finance. So looking for that detailed entry, making sure we don't have any errors. And then it goes to, that would either be myself or one of the senior techs. And then it goes to director or a designee within the department to approve that we have the correct budget. Is the item appropriate for us to purchase? Then to our CFO. Are high enough that we do have board approval. The final check that we're doing is that we're making sure we have three-way match. So three-way match is we put a purchase order in, we have received the goods, and then we have an invoice. So we do a purchase order. To load. But again, we're really trying to be fiscally responsible with taxpayers' money, making sure we, again, meet state procurement law. And then documentation. Did we follow the correct solicitation process? And then we want to make sure that we're not entering into a contract that's not favorable to the county. And then all of a sudden it's, it's attached to a big yacht, which is all of our amendments. And then
Sorry,
again,
Heather. I'm sorry, Heather, can I interrupt you? Is it just me for whom the presentation is glitching? Is that happening for you guys?
it seems like it's very, very delayed.
Yeah, it's glitching for me.
Apologies.
Yeah, this long silences in between few words.
Yes. Same,
Oh.
exactly. But then
Okay.
it comes back and it's clear, but then it just cuts for 15 seconds at a time.
I think there was a little message that came up, said that internet is unstable.
Yeah, I think we're having internet issues here.
Or maybe it's me.
I hear you fine.
I don't think it's.
All right, well, I'm sorry, everyone.
Apologies. It's Friday and I don't know that we have tech staff who can help
If
us.
Heather's the host, can you turn on like the captions? Perhaps, and then it'll kind of type out what you're saying fairly accurately and they can read it to. It might be glitchy too, but.
I like to do that with the commissioner meetings.
Yeah, it's
It helps.
helpful.
Yeah.
It's pretty accurate. You know where, what, post tools? I use. Yeah, I know. It's in the chat. Options, I think. Okay, so you're doing more. Post tools. It's not more. Okay. Option.
Is it in the audio or video?
Yeah.
Second.
It's good.
It's what got us.
Yeah.
Maybe just search it and see if it translates. Is it translating? Yes. No. Captions. Sorry.
Always show captions.
Always show captions. Where? Oh. Best.
You'll be happy.
You have to like scroll. Maybe apply.
There's APO.
Scroll down and.
But it's.
Nope, it's all.
Couple.
Yeah. Printers don't pay for anything.
Our transcripts working now?
Good.
Yeah, it's not strange. It's a Zoom, but it wants you to push.
Oh, I think that's there.
Oh, is that there?
Two.
Oh, that's part of the thing.
don't know, yeah. I don't know what else.
Why don't we, let's have you, I'm just gonna go both. Maybe. Maybe because there's two notes. And this.
We're so bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I got my nerves worked back. That's what happens in this Yarmouth room, that glitchy delay with audio and slides.
You know, if there's a way to make someone take away some.
Should be.
Yeah, maybe
it's to.
Yeah, why don't you just, because you said you emailed it to me, right?
I'll have to assign a new host. Remove permissions or things.
I made her a host. And
Oh, okay.
Saying that you can't.
you make me a host?
Looks like everybody's frozen now.
My computer is frozen now.
Oh, my goodness. Are we up?
So that is short us, you know, we don't.
If you need to continue, it's okay. I know we're on limited time, so.
They're.
We don't even have a hurricane.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Heather, can you make me a host?
That's one of those.
Or did you?
Yeah, and then she'll figure out.
Sure.
Okay, I've now left the meeting.
Okay.
So. So.
I feel like it's been glitchy the whole time, like, you know,
Larry had some out in my house.
Yeah.
I'm sure fire insurance was getting more expensive.
There's your resolution improved on your video quality? I left the meeting,
Okay.
but it was awful.
Very blurry, yeah.
Is it better or fixed or?
But she wasn't talking through her computer, she's talking through theirs.
Yeah, I think it's our internet here, because now I'm trying to open up Outlook to get that message and I can't even open up Outlook.
Yeah, I've been
Well, while we're waiting, do you have any questions on vendors or POs?
Purchase order, the purchase order part.
Have there been any long, and you guys got tricked? You guys got defrauded?
Yes, but we were able to recover the money.
Yes, we were one of the lucky 30%. So I've seen it, being in procurement for a while. A lot of our construction projects are the ones that we see most targeted because they're so large, and it's, sometimes they're publicized, you know, a lot of people know about the new courthouse, and one of the other ones that we've seen is one of the projects out at Solid Waste that was a pretty large one, also a construction project. When I worked at the city, same thing, you know, big construction projects. So it's just any of our larger projects where somebody's able to kind of try and substitute their information for ours, or for their information for the correct vendor, is how they try to do it.
I actually, when I was paying our third-party auditors, they had updated their invoices with a new address, and didn't let us know they wanted that to be changed, and the payments were still going to them, but the invoice didn't match. The address on the invoice didn't match the address in the vendor records, and finance caught it, and you know, and so I told them, hey, you guys need to change your address if you want this changed.
Yeah. Were you able to bring it up?
I don't think I'm not sure.
Well,
That's unfortunate as
It's a lot better.
Better?
It's quite a bit better. The visual is a little blurry, but it hasn't been glitching out, at least for me.
I was gonna say, as unfortunate as like falling for a scam is, like, I think it's like brought in a heightened awareness to the whole team, and everybody's more skeptical now as they get these vendor changes. And so it was a horrible experience. I hope we never have to go through it again. And we've really ramped up training and making sure our staff like are following all the processes and really detailed, like increase like our checklist, like every single week on there. There's no like room for doubt anymore. Like,
Why are checks the biggest risk?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are still utilizing checks for payments. The next highest one is ACH, so electronic payments. Luckily, electronic payments, we are easy to pull back if we feel like we've made a mistake, or not a mistake, but
yeah,
if
you have an
we
opportunity.
have the opportunity. Wires, we are so careful, because it's gone.
Hit that button, it's gone.
It's gone, yeah.
I think checks, because check fraud, like they can manipulate the check and then possibly get it through, so they can get just a lot of opportunities with a printed piece of paper to be able to.
Right.
And they have electronic signatures now as well, and so even if you need two signatures, they're just electronic, you can just grab. Signatures are widely available now, you can just Photoshop them onto a check, send off, the bank won't ever question it, if they even look at all.
All right, I think we're back.
So yeah.
All right, let's do it. So the very last thing I want to bring up is we want to make sure that we're not paying for an invoice before deliverables are met. So this is a really important piece for training for departments who are doing the contract administration, making sure that did the contractor actually perform the work that we're paying for? Have the deliverables been met?
Am I in the right place?
Thank you, went too far. Oh, there's my yacht. No, I'm just kidding. Back one more. Okay, so then we do have a pretty again, separation of duties. So the departments are initiating the contract drafting their contracts themselves. And they work with me. I can guide them on helping with working on their scope of work or helping them negotiate things. But really, where our big safety net falls for contracts that the county has are with the risk department. So they're helping us make sure that we have the correct insurance thresholds. And then also our legal department. They'll make sure that they're providing legal advice and support in reviewing our contracts. Okay. So additional internal controls around our entering into our ERP system. So all records are approved by finance that are entered for contracts. So we're checking to make sure that the expiration dates are correct, that the amounts are correct. And that's run by the senior account techs. Also, depending on the dollar threshold, I will see all of the contracts that are going through our system. Again, the department head is looking to make sure that we are charging it to the correct GL code. General ledger code. And then also Robert, our CFO, sees our contracts. And then depending again on the dollar threshold, he may forward that to Nick for approval. Our accounting system is really a good check to make sure that we're not overspending our contracts. We put it in for the contract, and then once we hit, if we get to that, get to that threshold or the amount that the contract's for, it'll stop us from spending.
I just want to add to that too, our contract module encumbers it. So also when you're like paying invoices separate, there's not available budget because that contract's already encumbered it. You make the payments. It's pretty good. All right, so Heather's passing me to AP, the area I still have. Yeah, so I think y'all are all pretty familiar with accounts payable risk, which is in your backgrounds. Definitely the ones that are high on my radar these days are loss of funds due to error, theft, again with the vendor fraud. And then actually inaccurate financial reporting has been pretty high on my radar, just with all the new GASBs recently around leases and NSPDAs. And then even capital assets, we have a ton of capital expenditures. I don't know, with like the courthouse going up. And so just making sure all of those expenditures are hitting the right classifications. So I kind of broke mine out between like preventative controls, system controls, and then detective controls. So some preventative controls we have in accounts payable. So our senior accounting technicians do review all the invoices. They're checking for adequate support, is that supporting documentation, like validating that that is a legitimate expense, is it allowable for policy? Is there proper approvals in place? Some things like go to the board before it ever gets entered into our system. Are there any procurement issues? Again, like if it doesn't go through POs or contracts, like is it still following procurement law? And then, yeah, is coding making sense? Is it hitting the right objects in our system? And then I also review every single refund that goes out. A lot of our departments have their own revenue softwares, and so they're collecting the payment. We're getting it. It's like some kind of export, import, or automated system is like coming. So the revenue is hitting our system, and it has to be refunded through AP. And so that's a control we have where they can't just like write off revenues in their software, and we never know about it because we're actually cutting the check. So all of those hit my queue. Our CFO does review all the check runs. He does a pretty thorough review every check run every week. He gets a listing of every single invoice by vendor, and is looking for anything suspicious and then authorizing that before we would ever print checks. I did add here that physical checks and printer, they're actually segregated to another team. So my team does not have access to the room where the checks and printer are. I don't have, even if I get in that room, I don't know like the code to the safe or anything like that. The auditors love that control. And then we have like an off-site location too in Redmond, which I also don't have access to. So I can't do anything. I cannot print a check. That's what I'm trying to say there. And then, oh yeah, so then on to system controls. You can go to the next slide. So some system controls that we have set up in Tyler Munis. So a recommendation from Givens back in 2020, we do not allow duplicate invoice numbers anymore. I also do a scan about once a year to make sure like somebody isn't like and so that's like a huge control with just how the access in the system is established. We also have pretty robust workflows. So I put the levels here. These levels also apply for what Heather was talking about with POs, requisitions, contracts. They follow county policy. Something that Givens always had noted was the CFO, the county administrator, that is a judgment call by Robert. So if Nick and the Board of Commissioners have already approved, like outside at a board meeting, he will approve at his step and say like, county administrator already approved this date. So, Board of Commissioners already approved this date. So that is a little bit of a manual thing in our workflow. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the budget stops. So if there's no available budget in that object in that org they're charging to, it will stop them. The budget team is the only one that holds that password. So if they need a budget adjustment, they're gonna have to go to the budget team, get the password, and then get whatever next steps for them to get a budget adjustment or reclass funds, however they need to. Right, and then some detective controls. So on the financial reporting aspect, the senior techs are reconciling our AP monthly, making sure that our balance sheet agrees to the underlying ledger. This actually can get pretty nasty sometimes when you think about, we have 60 active funds. So you move AP, like you move a invoice from admin to finance, all of a sudden AP is wrong. So it can be kind of tricky. I also have, for all the workflow in our system, I have like 4 different reports I run every month that's looking at, pretty much I focus on high dollar, like, am I seeing Nick and Robert on all these approvals for over 250,000? If I saw another name pop up there, I would be like, oh my God, oh my God. Whitney and Eric Crop do back up Nick a lot. And so I'm copied on those emails to know like they've delegated approval. So I'll like double check dates and make sure that they had delegation during those dates that they approved. I think that's a really good, I find it helpful because our workflow can get really complicated. And so it's just nice to know that on all those high dollar items that like we know it's working. Also, in our system, the way, so say we have like a random transaction go through and there's not workflow set up on it, it actually hits me and Melinda at what's called step 99. And so nothing can go through our system without approval. And so if it's hitting me at step 99, me and Melinda are talking and being like, what's going on with workflow? Why is this not hitting like the proper person in whatever department? And then getting that resolved. And then I also review all one-time pay vendors monthly. We do, so for like small settlements where there's not going to be a 1099 requirement, we do let them use a one-time pay vendor, same thing for refunds. And so I'm scanning those monthly, making sure there's nothing high dollar going through there and nothing suspicious. And then I'll turn it back over to Heather so she can do P cards with y'all.
All right, well, we're pretty close to wrapping up. So some of our risks on our purchase cards, or P cards as we call them, fraudulent purchases. So somebody getting a hold of that credit card number that shouldn't. Splitting transaction to avoid procurement limits. Again, anything that we buy on a P card is still subject to those procurement laws that we have to follow through the state. Ineffective transaction review. So we have a lot of policies in place for people or to guide people to know how to review a purchase card statement, making sure that we have receipts, documentation that matches the charges, and that we do have a receipt for every charge. And then our team is also looking for incorrect general ledger coding, so making sure that we're coding those to all of the right places. The one thing that's makes people nervous about P cards is there is a little bit of a lack of control, because there is the purchase before somebody is approving it later. So really good training on with our departments to make sure they know how to properly use the P card, what's appropriate for their use, is what our goal is, and making sure that departments have policies within their own department to make sure for them to be able to comfort in using the P cards. All right, so some of our internal controls, CFO and the department head have to approve all new P card requests and limit changes. Any temporary limit increases are set with an expiration date. So I can enter that into our system for P cards, and it'll expire. The limit increase will expire once that date hits. We have the ability to cancel a credit card online at any minute. So if somebody leaves the county for whatever reason, we don't have to take their card back. We can just go ahead and cancel it. We don't allow cash back on any of our P cards, and we have a really robust fraud alert system on our cards. All right, finance runs a monthly report to reconcile our ERP system to the bank's records, to make sure there aren't any cards out there that or at the bank that are still active, that should not be active when we check our system. For P card reconciliation, Tyler, ERP is where the reconciliation occurs. Every transaction requires a general ledger coding and a receipt that's attached in our financial system, so we can easily find that and reference it. Every single charge or end entry is reviewed by a supervisor and also our finance team. And with that,
any questions?
Any questions? It's a lot.
Yeah. Any questions on those?
Do you guys use like positive pay for checks and banking?
We do. That's actually like a separate internal discussion we could do on like the banking setup and all of those controls. But yes, we do use positive pay.
Anything else for Jana or Heather?
Right past.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us. And I guess just let me know which topic y'all want to do, if y'all want to do it, if y'all find it valuable.
I'm gonna let Jason go too, because he's also trying to get to this meeting. He has a handout here. And for people who are online, the handout is in the meeting invitation, so if you want to grab that as an.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself while papers being passed, and I'm enjoying the same 3 p.m. meeting as our finance folks. I missed introductions. My name is Jason Bavuso. I'm the interim HR director, and I'm here today speaking about the committee's very important work to evaluate the performance of our internal auditor. So just reflecting a bit or reviewing the 2024 process, and then discussing a little bit or prompting the committee to explore a little bit how the 2025 evaluation could go. So I think there is a general understanding and acceptance that Elizabeth's joining us and prompted some pivots to the performance evaluation process, and it was one that I think everybody expected we would learn a little bit from as that new process unfolded. To review it, I believe the Human Resources, our prior HR director, Kathleen Hinman, had distributed our supervisor version of our performance evaluation to the committee, and individual committee members completed that and provided feedback, and HR assembled that into an evaluation memo that was issued to Elizabeth and included any goals for the next evaluation period. So that's a review of last year. I think the topics of this discussion would be some near-term clarifications to inform Elizabeth's work, and I'll let Elizabeth maybe briefly speak to that right now, if that's okay, Elizabeth.
Yeah. So there were, I think we started talking about, in the past, Nick used to do my performance evaluation, but Nick is kind of new to his role. I'm new to this role, and we both thought, well, maybe it just doesn't quite feel right that the county administrator, who also oversees the departments for auditing, would be doing my evaluation. So we proposed to HR and to the committee, maybe the committee should take over that role in evaluating, doing my annual performance evaluation. So we started that in July, but I think we were kind of late to the party and really got that process going up really quickly. And I don't think it was quite ideal in the kind of oh gosh, what the areas that I would be evaluated. We just picked up the standard the standard supervisor review, and then people were asked to use it. So what I did is I worked with some of the people through the Algo organization, which Larry told you about, to get how other people who are in my position and other local governments are evaluated. And so Jason just wants to kind of walk through that with you, with the intent that you all might adopt a new framework for evaluation, which we can then start using going into next June, but it takes a while to get there. So that's why we're doing this now. Also, I had some questions for Jason just about the goals that I was given for the year, because yeah, if they were how they were the way goals are usually written, or if I could be given some more guidance. So I think he's going to talk to you about that as well.
Sure. So as Elizabeth had one goal for this evaluation period, and I can't recall the verbiage of the goal. Elizabeth, can you remind the group if you have it at hand?
I will look for it. There. Jason, why don't you keep talking, and I'll let you know when I find it.
Oh, sure. Well, I think Elizabeth and I discussed that goal. I think it pertained to working well with the departments, or words to that effect. And we, in performance goal setting, there is this acronym SMART that you might have heard. It's just a set of attributes that are best practice to be considered when making a goal. And off the top of my head, it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And so I think Elizabeth and I just go ahead.
I did find it. So my goal is to improve upon coordination of audits with departments.
Thank you. So we had discussed that this goal as written might be missing some of those attributes of SMART goal setting. So I have included in the packet that the committee received some resources that might help sharpen the pencil a bit on that goal, so that Elizabeth has something that she can meaningfully act upon during this evaluation period. And I think we were both attentive to the fact that the evaluation period is underway, and Elizabeth's ability to influence that goal is that the clock is ticking on that. So something that we would, I think Elizabeth would be appreciative if the committee was able to prioritize that pencil sharpening. As I'd mentioned, there is a couple of resources in this small packet that I had added. One is just a brief overview article of writing SMART goals. And the second is a tool that the county is piloting right now as part of a revamped performance evaluation process. And it is a SMART goals worksheet. And the intent is to take a goal and kind of move it through a set of prompts, and add that detail that can bring those attributes to bear. So that was the first topic, was some near-term feedback of the prior product and some refining that may help Elizabeth during the current evaluation year. The second topic that wanted to go through was some, and Elizabeth alluded to it, was some potential modifications for the committee to consider for the 2025 evaluation. I think these are also time sensitive. So I think, because if there's any retooling of the criteria by which Elizabeth is evaluated, it would be good if she has some time to be attentive to those. Last year, as I'd mentioned, the supervisor evaluation tool was utilized, and I think Elizabeth and I agreed, and the committee can consider its relevance to Elizabeth's unique role with the county. And so Elizabeth had done some work to provide a sample or a proposed set of measures by which she would be evaluated in this fiscal year, or sorry, this evaluation year and beyond. And I believe Elizabeth has assembled that through some benchmarking amongst other public entities, and how what competencies they evaluate their internal auditor on. Elizabeth, did you want to elaborate on that at all, or as to how that was created?
I think, that's right. I reached out to our professional organization, and there's a committee that talks about standards and provides advice on things like this. And so I think this was based mostly on the person who chairs that committee is the auditor at the city of Atlanta, and this seemed to make sense to me, so I'm proposing it to you. But certainly if there are other things you think should be added or taken away, we're both open to that. Yeah, this is just a starting point for you.
Thank you. Another potential modification of the process involves the output of the committee's individual feedback and how that's brought to Elizabeth. We had looked through the memo that was issued last year, and there were a couple. There were it was very much a kind of excerpting of feedback provided by the committee that was formed into this memo. And I think Elizabeth and I both noted that in taking an excerpting a type of approach, sometimes there was conflicting feedback within sections and between sections of the memo. And that that can create some confusion if you're being told to go two different directions at the same time, sometimes in the same breath. So our one potential way to get around that, and we here in HR are happy to continue to be a resource for you, is instead of excerpting and just issuing this memo, to look at the feedback holistically, and attempt to create a memo with a narrative that avoids any notes, but avoids incorporating any conflicting direction. And that would be presented to the committee to discuss. They could work through if there were any differences of opinion, which is reasonable sometimes on some points, that the committee would massage that document and come to a consensus they all sign off on as the statement of and the evaluation of Elizabeth's performance, and so it would have a more consistent evaluation on those points. So that was a second piece, and then third, similar to the feedback with the last cycle, was just to form goals using those SMART attributes, and that gives Elizabeth good tangible feedback and plans for how she would conduct that function in the following year. And I and HR are happy to continue to be a resource. I think it would be great if the committee were able to huddle on a couple of things. One was that goal, and if there's any additional detail that can bring some meaning to it. And I would offer myself, I think that could come from the worksheet and completing that, or if it's a assembly of thoughts to elaborate on the goal is written, I'd be happy to help kind of convert that into a draft that the committee could review, adjust, and present to Elizabeth. So that was the feedback, and be happy to entertain any discussion about process or other things that might go a little differently or should be preserved for this evaluation year.
Okay.
All right. Barring any other feedback, I'd be happy to be a resource to the committee on either of those, either that goal modification or elaboration for this year, or assembling thoughts as to the current evaluation year into a document that kind of formalizes that process.
Well, yeah, I certainly think we're going to need your involvement.
Yeah, we're happy to be a firewall and a resource for that too.
Yeah. So kind of what I'm hearing is the goal that we developed, we need to kind of convert that into a SMART goal using some of the, so that's one thing we need to do. And you can use some of this information you provided us to do that, help us assist us with that.
Yes, and we were thinking that perhaps I know there was a subcommittee who sort of met with Kathleen to work on the initial evaluation. So it could be that a subcommittee did that work, or it could also be that you all provided information back to Jason. So either of those could work.
I was having room for a lot of discussion on the goal issue. We were, making it up as we went along on this evaluation. There was also some time pressure on us, and I was uncomfortable in doing it, but we didn't have an alternative. I don't feel like I know enough about exactly Elizabeth's job performance from these meetings, and don't understand it enough to give her something that can be really useful for her. But I don't know how to get around that also, at least from my point of view. There are people that have audit backgrounds on this committee, and I think we would have probably, if we had had more time, we could have incorporated the folks who really know what to look for and what makes sense in the process if we started a little earlier.
I think Elizabeth and I discussed one idea that might mitigate some of that, and that is very reasonable. Your view of Elizabeth's work is limited, and it is to her work product, and how she goes about that work. We discussed the potential for Nick to perform a supplemental evaluation that focuses on more of the nuts and bolts of an employee's, do they show up to work on time? Is there, and those other things that the committee wouldn't be in the committee's purview. So if the committee was open to that and Nick was open to that, that could be something that we could fold into the process. So then in that case, the committee would focus very specifically on those competencies and how they see them brought to bear in that work.
I think using a subcommittee also might increase the efficiency of doing this. It used to be that efficiently. Also, the ALGA information would help us with the auditor specific parts of the goal. So if you use the ALGA information and you and find out the SMART process, maybe we could come up with something that makes sense from the audit standpoint. So the tools, use those tools to do that.
To take a mid-year mark and to address some of these items. We're already getting up toward November. Some work could be done by the subcommittee between now and January. And then to kind of be better streamline and define the process and work on kind of providing some more actionable steps within that particular goal.
Jason, would you be willing to, give us the text of our goal and sort of an outline, a little primer on what it look like and maybe where we need to spend more time, that sort of thing, and kind of spell it out for us. You probably did while I was outside the room, but I still need that even while I was sitting here. So I think what you're asking for us is to redo the goal, and it's a reasonable request. But I need to understand more about what I need to be looking for or where it fell short.
So the packet includes some about an article about SMART goals, and then also a form that human resources. He's frozen.
Yeah, thank you. It's also easier.
I did miss some important conversation there, I think. So if there was an ask.
I think Jason, Chuck was looking for some more guidance.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about the goal other than what's written. So I think if there's further ideas to flesh it out, I could assist in either asking some questions that prompt content that the committee would add to bring those SMART attributes to bear, or take a hack at it myself and send it your way. So I would need some more background on it as I lack that.
See to that earlier point about excerpts versus a summary, I think that's a fair point and feedback, and I think that's something we give him more time because we're coming up with the process and had a time constraint. I think given more time, the subcommittee could form that function of creating a narrative around it rather than specific excerpts that from different people's perspective seem to be, not always aligned. I just want to acknowledge that that's a fair request and something that could be done.
And I'm happy to help that along
So-
as much or as little as you need.
Is doing, as far as using the subcommittee or a subcommittee to do this work, I think that makes sense, but. Go forward, we can find that. Anyway, I can issue
Start with
that.
us. Yeah, that's okay.
So why don't we, let's decide, let's do that. And then as far as the schedule, we get this done. Here's the thing.
The goal is not clear, but, just the back.
Subcommittee was myself. Judge. Jody. Did she hear us?
Yes, I was on it, but I don't know if I have much time right now.
Okay.
Sounds like she doesn't have time.
Sounds like she doesn't have time.
Someone else.
So can we solicit someone else?
Unfortunately, it looks like Joe and Summer both had to leave, so it's two other public
Oh,
members.
I'd be happy to do it, but I don't have personal experience with Elizabeth's work, having, been a recent. So, but if I can help, I'm happy to. The input part of it may not be helpful, but I don't know if I can be helpful.
I think with we'll have some guidance. I'm kind of. It would work, but.
Yeah, and just, I mean. This is only 50% there, and this is what it needs. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think your first goal is to have a meeting room that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, we won't come here again.
Unfortunate.
Okay, Jason, I think we're gonna let you go. Thank you.
Okay, well, happy to connect offline as needed to help that along. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Sorry about Summer's gone. Jody's still here.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't touch these further.
I think we should.
I'll make a motion that we ask the subcommittee to do that work as previously discussed.
We'll second motion. And with the caveat that the subcommittee consists of.
Just was Daryl, Doug, and Bill.
Okay. So that. Discussing.
Kind of. Can and
We like I think Jason's presence when we do that. That'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
you're gonna do.
Yeah.
I've got Mr. Chair, I've got
Let's see, we have a couple more things on our agenda. That I think we probably could do those next time. That was the risk ranking. We did our global follow-up last year. We included higher risk recommendations that we wanted to see followed up on. So our presentation includes just an explanation of how we came up with that, and also an invitation to anyone who's interested from the committee for helping me weigh in on how we assess risk. That's recommendation. But I think that.
Yeah, because we're gonna hold the bylaws for next time for sure. We lost some of our.
Yeah.
Things, so. The risk item. Present that today, or we could wait.
We're over time. I think we should wait.
Yeah.
Then the administrative.
Yeah, and we haven't had a big
Okay, we can do, okay. Let's do that. We can.
Oh, sure, well, just in terms of, we'll just talk about recruitment, since we have our recruitment out currently for our human resources director. Initially was gonna close a couple couple of weeks ago, we just extended it a bit to get a robust tool that we hope. And we will begin our human resources director recruitment in January. So we'll begin that process fairly soon. And then, of course, as we know, there's a 25 days where we'll have a new sheriff that will begin. And that's, of course, on your audit report as well. So you're aware of this, the sheriff transition with the retirement of Sheriff Nelson. That's a certainty. So we'll have those three changes of the county. So those are the big updates. We're working a lot with finance right now as we have a projected structural imbalance beginning in fiscal year 27. So not this next budgeting process at the staff department head level right now. So we can begin to plan accordingly so that we can minimize impacts for the future. So nothing else to report on that other than it's important to us, and we'll begin to address it soon. As we have every year, assumptions are going into the fiscal year 26 budget at that point, and then that's not been finalized really until early calendar year 25, but it's a big deal for us. So my updates. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you, Whitney.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you very much. What do we have left? So and committee information. I'll leave that for next time.
Yeah, that's just a handout that you all have, a packet with information about the committee.
Yep.
And then Dee Dee's here, is gonna give us a short presentation on parole and probation and our community justice department.
Yeah.
Can be very short since you're over time.
The internet as a whole, it's hard to assess.
Yes, well, apologies for that. Nice to meet you all. I am Dee Dee Holcomb. You're in our community justice building. I think this is your second meeting here.
Yes.
We have parole and probation, which is this building, and then juvenile right next door. That includes juvenile detention. We have about 90 our social science, our mission and vision is very, very similar for both. And we take it very seriously. It's kind of the approach we try to apply to everything, every decision we do, which is, how do we reduce the risk of people to commit offenses? How do we repair the harm of the crime that they have caused, the harm for themselves? And how do we create new opportunities for a path forward? Kind of really like a good parent should. Strong boundaries, strong accountability, and strong levels of caring. Everyone is going through what they're going through, and it takes as long as it takes to get there. So that's what we do. I'd say the bulk of our work is community-based supervision. So these are folks who are out in the community, maybe convicted of felonies outside, or just brought in to the attention of law enforcement for young folks. But most majority that, not community justice, it's a different department. We do have a detention center, like I mentioned before, but it's actually pretty rarely that we use those, given their disruptive nature, and they don't actually do much to prevent recidivism. Sometimes people say that actually makes it worse, particularly on the young person side, which is interesting. Sometimes we have to do it, but it's not particularly effective. So yeah, that's super, super brief. Does anybody have any questions? I'm so cognizant of your time on a Friday afternoon. Thank you for your.
However, your staffing levels been, I know that's been a kind of a critical area for you.
Yes, really only one of our units, which is the detention side. We have had a tremendous amount of staffing attrition since the pandemic. Actually, that
We just brought in 4 or 5 people. We had a good pool of people to hire 4 people within about 5 weeks, which is almost unheard of. So that, I think things are getting better. Maybe as kind of remote work becomes less appealing, maybe some of that, it's kind of balancing out the fact that shift work is and particularly kind of confined environment during a pandemic. We never did have an outbreak, just so you know. We kept our protocols really, really tight, and we managed to keep everybody safe, which is great. It's getting better, it's still a problem.
Other people attending remotely.
Okay.
And Judge just left, and Patty Dare is also on.
Yeah, that's right. Patty's not here today.
Well, thank you. I've been sharing with Elizabeth that the last several audits y'all have done have been extremely relevant, interesting. I will confess, I don't read all of them with, bated breath as they come through, but these last few I really have, and they've been. Yes, sorry about that. I'll just tell Tanner, our deputy director, he's a
No.
tech guy, he's being really mad.
No internal controls for the internet. It's all environment.
There's that fun storm.
Maybe, let's blame it on that.
Okay, so we've covered everything, have we not? I should say. Okay. See you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.